The wind cut through the dense forest like an unseen blade, rustling the towering evergreens and carrying the crisp scent of pine and damp earth. The sky, an endless stretch of gray, threatened another round of snowfall, casting the vast wilderness in a somber light. Deep in this rugged terrain, where nature showed no mercy, a lone figure moved along a narrow trail, his boots crunching against the frostbitten ground. Daniel Reed had spent the last decade living on the edge of civilization, a choice not made lightly but one he had never regretted. A former military medic turned wildlife researcher, he had abandoned the clamor of the city for the serenity of the wilderness. His home, a modest log cabin nestled near the base of the Rockies, stood as a silent witness to his self-imposed exile. Some called him a recluse, others an idealist, but Daniel didn't care for labels. To him, the wilderness was not just a place, it was a living, breathing entity, one that demanded respect and rewarded those who understood its rhythm. Each morning, he followed a routine that had become second nature. He woke before dawn, brewed a cup of coffee thick as tar, and stepped outside to greet the day, inhaling the crisp air like a man drawing his first breath. The forest was alive in ways most people never noticed, the distant howl of a wolf signaling its territory, the rhythmic pecking of a woodpecker on hollow bark, the quiet rustling of unseen creatures moving through the underbrush. Daniel had always felt more at home here than anywhere else. He wasn't running from anything, at least, that's what he told himself. The truth was more complicated. After years in war zones and emergency rooms, where death was an unwelcome but constant companion, he had grown tired of fighting battles he couldn't win. The wilderness offered something different, a world where survival was not dictated by politics or human cruelty but by the unyielding laws of nature. And yet, nature could be just as cruel. As he adjusted the strap of his rifle, slung across his back, Daniel's sharp eyes scanned the frozen landscape, instincts humming with an unease he couldn't quite place. The forest was quieter than usual, too quiet. The usual chorus of birdsong had vanished, leaving behind an eerie stillness that set his teeth on edge. Then, cutting through the silence like a jagged wound, came a sound that made his blood run cold, a deep, guttural groan, raw with agony. Daniel's breath hitched. He had heard plenty of animal cries in his time, but this was different. It wasn't the distant yelp of a coyote or the warning growl of a wolf. This was something bigger. Something in pain. His grip tightened on his rifle. Whatever it was close, and it needed help. Daniel moved swiftly, following the source of the sound through the dense trees, his breath coming in visible clouds. The terrain was unforgiving, thick underbrush snagged at his pants, and jagged rocks jutted from the frozen ground, demanding careful footing. He was no stranger to tracking wounded animals, but this time, something about the sound unsettled him. Another groan echoed through the trees, weaker this time, followed by a ragged, labored breath. Then he saw it. A bear. Not just any bear, a massive grizzly sprawled across the snow-covered earth, its heaving chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. Its thick, golden-brown fur was matted with blood and dirt, a dark crimson stain spreading from a deep wound in its side. A hunting snare coiled tight around its hind leg, the steel digging cruelly into flesh, cutting down to the bone. Daniel cursed under his breath. Poachers. His jaw clenched as he approached cautiously, boots crunching over frost. The bear's ears twitched at the sound, and its dark eyes, dulled with pain, flickered open for a moment. The two locked gazes, man and beast, predator and human, separated by nothing but a few feet of frozen earth and a lifetime of instinct. The bear let out a warning growl, a weak but unmistakable message: stay back. Daniel knew the risks. A wounded animal was dangerous, even one as weakened as this. But he also knew something else: if he walked away now, this bear wouldn't make it through the night. The cold alone would take it if the blood loss or infection didn't get there first. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. Damn it. Stepping forward slowly, he kept his voice low, soothing. Easy, big guy. I'm not here to hurt you. The bear's breathing hitched, nostrils flaring as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Its body tensed as Daniel knelt a few feet away, scanning the wound. The steel trap was cruelly efficient, designed not to kill outright, but to hold an animal in place, letting it die slowly from exhaustion or starvation. Rage coiled in Daniel's gut. He had seen poachers' handiwork before, but it never failed to ignite something primal inside him. These men weren't hunters. They were killers. And today, they had left something behind. The bear let out a sharp grunt as it shifted, trying to free itself, but the trap held firm. Fresh blood pooled beneath its leg. If he didn't act now, it would either bleed out or succumb to shock. Daniel adjusted his grip on his rifle. Then he made his decision. "All right, buddy," he murmured. "I'm going to get you out of this." The bear's gaze remained locked on him, unreadable. Moving carefully, Daniel slid his backpack off his shoulders, retrieving a small medical kit and a pair of bolt cutters. He always carried one of the few remnants from his military days that still served a purpose. His fingers were numb from the cold as he positioned the cutters over the steel wire. "This is going to hurt," he warned, as if the bear could understand. He pressed down. The steel snapped with a sharp clang. The bear roared in pain, its massive body jerking, but it didn't lunge. Instead, it sagged against the ground, panting heavily. The wound on its leg was deep, too deep for it to walk without collapsing. Daniel swallowed hard. This wasn't just a quick fix. This bear needed serious help. And out here, miles from any proper facility, there was only one person who could provide it. Him. His gaze flickered toward the horizon. The cabin was at least 4 miles away. The bear wouldn't make it on its own, not in this condition. And there was no way he was leaving it here, vulnerable to scavengers or another group of poachers. That left only one option. "I must be out of my damn mind," Daniel muttered. Then he did something no sane person would ever consider. He grabbed hold of the bear and started walking. The first few steps were brutal. The bear was half-conscious, its massive frame pressing against him as he struggled to keep them both upright. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. The icy wind cut through his jacket, but sweat slicked his back as he trudged through knee-high snow, one foot in front of the other. His breath came in ragged gasps, each exhale visible in the frigid air. The bear's weight was staggering, even in its weakened state. His boots slipped against a patch of ice. And for a moment, they both went down. The bear let out a guttural groan as it hit the ground. Its body trembling from exhaustion, Daniel cursed, planting his hands against his knees. He could turn back, leave the bear behind, but when he looked at it, at the slow rise and fall of its breath, at the way its blood darkened the snow beneath them, he knew that wasn't an option. So he did what he had always done: he picked himself up and kept going. The hours blurred together. His legs burned, his vision swam with exhaustion, but the thought of stopping never crossed his mind. The bear's head lolled against his shoulder, its body limp but still alive. He could feel the rhythmic thud of its heartbeat, slow but steady. The storm that had threatened earlier finally broke, and snowflakes drifted down from the sky, clinging to his lashes as he pressed forward. The world around him was silent, save for the crunch of his boots and the low, ragged breaths of the injured animal he carried. Then, finally, he saw it, the cabin. A wave of relief crashed over him, but he didn't let himself slow down. He stumbled toward the door, his strength nearly spent, and with one final burst of energy, he pushed inside, collapsing onto the wooden floor with the bear still half-draped over him. For a long moment, he simply lay there, his chest rising and falling in harsh, uneven breaths. The warmth of the cabin was a stark contrast to the frozen hell he had just walked through. Then, slowly, he lifted his head, his gaze landing on the wounded bear beside him. It was alive, barely, but alive. And now, the real challenge began. Daniel lay on the wooden floor, his lungs burning, his arms trembling from exhaustion. The warmth of the cabin wrapped around him like a second skin, but his body was still numb from the relentless cold. Beside him, the injured grizzly remained motionless, its massive body sprawled across the floor. Its breathing was shallow but steady, a fragile lifeline tethering it to the world. For a moment, Daniel let himself believe they had made it. Then reality set in. The bear was still bleeding, still weak, and if he didn't act fast, the very thing he had just risked his life for would die right in front of him. His muscles screamed in protest as he forced himself upright. "All right, big guy," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "We're not done yet." Daniel staggered toward his supply cabinet, pulling out everything he might need: clean bandages, antiseptic, a needle and thread. His hands shook as he worked, both from the cold and from the knowledge of what he was about to do. Treating an injured bear in an open field was one thing, treating it in a closed cabin, where it could wake up and rip him apart at any moment, was something else entirely. His mind warred with itself. "You should have left it. This is insane." But another voice, one quieter yet far stronger, whispered back. "If you don't do this, it dies." The thought settled like a stone in his gut. Daniel grabbed a bottle of antiseptic and a strip of cloth. He needed to clean the wound before infection set in. The snare had cut deep, exposing raw flesh and muscle. The sight made his stomach twist, but he pushed the feeling down. He had seen worse. As he reached for the bear's injured leg, it twitched. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the cabin, so weak it barely carried, but it was a warning all the same. Daniel froze. For several long, breathless seconds, he remained perfectly still, waiting to see if the bear would lash out. His fingers hovered inches above the wound, his pulse thudding in his ears. Then, slowly, the growling faded. The bear's body relaxed, its breathing slow and labored. It was too weak to fight him, but that didn't mean it trusted him. Daniel exhaled shakily and got to work. The antiseptic burned as he poured it over the wound, and the bear flinched violently, letting out a sharp grunt. Daniel gritted his teeth and worked as quickly as he could, dabbing at the wound with a cloth to clear the blood before stitching it closed. His fingers were deft, methodical, moving with the precision of someone who had spent years patching up wounds in places far worse than this. He worked in silence, the only sounds in the cabin being the crackling of the fire and the steady rise and fall of the bear's breaths. By the time he finished, his body was slick with sweat despite the cold. He sat back, staring at the bear's bandaged leg, exhaustion pressing down on him like a heavy weight. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was enough. Now, all he could do was wait. For hours, Daniel sat beside the bear, watching its slow, steady breaths. His rifle rested within arm's reach, though he wasn't sure if he'd be able to use it even if he had to. He told himself he had done the right thing, that he had saved a life today. But had he just signed his own death warrant? What happens when it wakes up? The thought gnawed at him, kept him on edge even as exhaustion pulled at his limbs. Would it recognize him as the one who saved it, or would instinct take over, turning him into nothing more than another threat to be eliminated? The bear was a wild animal. It didn't owe him anything. And yet, looking at it now, vulnerable in a way no one had ever seen before, he couldn't bring himself to regret what he had done. His fingers drifted to a long scar on his forearm, a reminder of another life, one filled with battlefields and emergency tents where saving lives had been his purpose. Maybe it still was. Maybe that's why he had brought the bear here. Not out of logic. Not even out of survival. But because, deep down, he wasn't ready to stop fighting. Not yet. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but inside, all was still. Daniel's eyelids grew heavy, his body demanding rest. For the first time in years, he let himself close his eyes. When Daniel woke, it was still dark. The fire had burned down to embers, the air thick with the scent of pine and something else, something warm and earthy. He wasn't alone. His breath hitched. The bear was awake. It was watching him, a silent, unmoving presence in the dim light. Its deep brown eyes, sharp and alert, locked onto him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Daniel didn't move. The cabin felt too small. Too enclosed. He was trapped in here with a creature powerful enough to end him in seconds. But the bear didn't attack. It simply stared. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, in a movement so subtle it almost went unnoticed, the bear did something Daniel never expected. It blinked, a slow, deliberate motion. And then, just as slowly, it lowered its massive head back onto the floor and exhaled a deep, shuddering breath. Daniel let out a breath of his own, his heart hammering against his ribs. That wasn't instinct. That wasn't fear. That was understanding. The bear knew. It knew he had saved its life. The realization sent a strange, unexplainable feeling through Daniel's chest. He had spent years in the wilderness, always on the outside looking in, never truly a part of the world he had chosen to live in. But now, for the first time, he felt something shift, a connection, a fragile, unspoken trust between man and beast. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was something more. And in that moment, Daniel understood. Whatever happened next, whatever the future held, he had already crossed a line. And there was no going back. The days passed slowly. Daniel spent them tending to the bear's wounds, rationing his supplies to keep it fed, and watching, always watching, for any sign that its primal instincts might turn against him. But the attack never came. The bear remained still in the early days, too weak to move, but as the infection faded and its strength returned, something changed. It stopped growling when he approached. It accepted the food he laid before it, though it never took more than what was given. And it watched him, not with the dull weariness of a wounded animal, but with something deeper. Something aware. Daniel had spent his entire life believing he understood the laws of nature. The wild was brutal, ruled by instinct, where survival trumped sentiment. And yet, here he was, living alongside a predator that should have torn him apart, sharing a space where unspoken trust had taken root. One evening, as the fire crackled and the storm outside softened to a whisper, Daniel sat in his usual spot by the hearth, rubbing a tired hand over his face. The bear lay on the other side of the room, its breathing steady, no longer labored. It was healing. Soon, it would leave. And that should have been a relief. Instead, the thought settled like a weight in his chest. He had spent years alone, telling himself he preferred it that way, that people only complicated things, that the wilderness was the only thing that made sense. But now, staring at the creature that had once been nothing more than a distant shadow in the trees, he wondered if he had been wrong. Maybe solitude had never been his choice. Maybe it had just been the easiest way to keep himself from feeling anything at all. The morning the bear finally stood on all fours, Daniel knew it was time. Its wounds had closed. Its strength had returned. It no longer needed him. Still, he hesitated as he stepped onto the porch, holding the door open. The world outside stretched wide and endless, untouched by human hands. The bear stood at the threshold, staring out into the wild. Then, slowly, it turned to look at him. A silent moment passed. And then, without a sound, it stepped forward, out into the snow, into the trees, and back into the life it had nearly lost. Daniel watched until it disappeared. He should have turned away. Should have closed the door and gone back inside, back to the routine of his quiet, solitary life. But he didn't. Instead, he lingered. Watching. Waiting. Hoping. And somehow, deep in his bones, he knew. This wasn't the end of their story. Not yet. Because some debts could never truly be repaid. And some connections, no matter how improbable, could never truly be broken. If this story moved you, imagine the countless untold tales of courage, survival, and the extraordinary bond between humans and wildlife. These moments remind us that kindness has no language, no boundaries, only impact. By subscribing to our channel, you're not just enjoying incredible wildlife stories, you're helping share the beauty and resilience of nature with the world. Every like, comment, and share brings more awareness to the struggles and triumphs of the animals we rarely get to see up close. Join our community of nature lovers and storytellers, where every story is a reminder of how powerful compassion can be. Hit subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss another breathtaking tale of the wild. Because sometimes, the most amazing stories aren't just about survival. They're about connection. Let's keep sharing these moments, one story at a time.